Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Angela Hill. William Jefferson will spend the next 13 years in prison. That sentence was handed down moments ago at a federal court in Alexandria, Virginia. Our Begad Shaban has been in the courtroom and will be joining us momentarily with details. Bill Jefferson, 62 years old, was a 9-term congressman. He was found guilty of 11 counts of racketeering and bribery on August 5th. A big question today will be whether the former congressman will be sent immediately to jail or if he will be given the 60 or 90 days normally given nonviolent criminals. Letters from friends, 2 reverends, and his 5 daughters were sent to the judge asking him to look beyond what happened in the courtroom in August and to look at Jefferson's character and accomplishments. Well, joining us now, Loyola University law professor Dane Cialino. Appreciate you being here. Are you surprised by 13 years?
Well, I think many people are surprised. Apparently, the pre-sentence investigation report prepared by probation called for a much longer sentence, one closer to what the government was looking for, which was upwards of 27, 28 years. So obviously, the judge resolved a lot of the objections to the pre-sentence investigation report in favor of the former congressman. Those pre-sentence investigation report objection hearings are usually very difficult for defendants to win. And in cases like this, the amount of money at issue is usually what the principal question is. And the government was alleging that $500 million was at issue. And I imagine what happened, we haven't heard the word directly from the courtroom yet, was that the judge said that there was much less money involved. And as a result, the applicable guidelines range was a lot lower than what the government was calling for.
The defense attorneys were asking for 10 or under. Was that realistic?
I don't think it was. And in a case where co-defendants who pled guilty and who cooperated got just over 7 years and just over 8 years for the other, because Congressman Jefferson took the case to trial, did not accept responsibility, did not cooperate, it wasn't realistic for him to get a comparable sentence. But given that they were all involved in the same schemes, it would have been probably unfair to give him a disproportionate sentence as well. One of the justifications for a guideline sentencing scheme is that like defendants should be sentenced, be given similar sentences. And that seems to have worked here. Assuming that the judge resolved the guidelines disputes the way that it appears he has, the congressman has been given a sentence that is in line with his co-defendants, but that does also reflect that he did not accept responsibility and that he forced the matter to trial.
Will he have to go to jail immediately? Will he be given that time to prepare? Will he be able to stay out of jail until his appeal?
Right, all very major issues. Obviously, he would like the ability to self-surrender to the Bureau of Prisons rather than being remanded immediately to custody. And in cases like this, typically, since he did have bail pending the sentencing, the judge would allow him to self-surrender. It would be unusual if he had to report or if he was remanded immediately. So it'll be interesting to see what the judge did.
The prosecutors, of course, were saying, we feel this man is a flight risk.
Well, they made the argument after he was convicted, and Judge Ellis essentially overruled the argument and said that he was not a flight risk and allowed him to stay out on his existing bond. And I would expect that that's what happened today, although we don't know, that since he was out on bond pending sentencing, that he'll probably remain on bond and he'll be allowed to self-surrender to the Bureau of Prisons.
What we do know is that the former congressman was given the ability to speak at this hearing today, but his attorney said that he would not be doing that because they are going to appeal. Now that brings up, he has filed for bankruptcy. Our understanding is that he has not paid Mr. Trout, his attorney. And is it unusual then for Mr. Trout to say, I'm going to handle his appeal?
Well, again, payment is always an issue when it comes to criminal defense lawyers in practice. So I think he hasn't committed, I imagine, to handle the appeal. And he's going to have to work with Congressman Jefferson about those issues. And if Congressman Jefferson is indigent, then obviously he'll get a lawyer appointed to handle his first appeal as of right to the Court of Appeals. But I think that those are developing issues.
What could his appeal be? Would it have anything to do with what we found out after the trial about the FBI agent who had the sexual relationship with one of the star witnesses, Ms. Modi?
Well, you could bet that his defense lawyers will try to make a mountain out of that. They'll challenge the sufficiency of the evidence. They'll challenge a number of the pretrial rulings that dealt with the unusual searches of the congressman's office that raised speech and debate clause issues. They've got a number of issues to raise. Whether any of those issues will bear fruit and get him a new trial, that's doubtful, given that criminal defendants rarely are successful in their appeals. And there wasn't much about this particular case that suggests that Congressman Jefferson would have any higher chance of success than most criminal defendants.
Governor Edwin Edwards was able to stay out of jail for 22 months waiting for his appeal. So there is, I mean, it could happen. Yeah,
it could. And in that case, there was a very peculiar issue that dealt with one of the jurors and the deliberations. And in that case, the court determined that there was a substantial issue on appeal, which the governor had a decent chance of success on. That's going to be the standard that is going to be applied in determining whether or not Mr. Jefferson should get bond pending appeal.
It's very interesting at this moment in our history that the Jeffersons, who were a real dynasty in a sense, Mose Jefferson just this week saying, I've already been found guilty of one, but please don't sentence me because now I have a new trial and that may not be good for that jury. Betty Jefferson indicted for something, her daughter as well. Your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously bad times for the Jefferson family. And Mose Jefferson obviously was looking for just more time to be out during the holidays, to not deal with the sentencing immediately. Judge Lemon decided, however, that he will be sentenced in December, and that even that won't end his problems because he has another trial on other serious charges come January.
Well, we are still waiting for Begad Shaban, who has been there since yesterday and was in the courtroom when the decision was made to give former Congressman Jefferson 13 years in prison. Let's talk about perhaps what kind of prison.
Well, given that he has gotten a 13-year sentence rather than a sentence, an astronomical sentence in the 30-plus year range, at some point he will be eligible to go to a federal prison camp, a level 1 prison, rather than going to a higher security penitentiary. That's really up to the Bureau of Prisons. His lawyers and the judge can recommend institutions, and the judge may have done that in this case. We'll have to see. But it's up to the Bureau of Prisons. They have their own internal procedures that they use in deciding what institution they should designate the convicted defendant to. Eventually, he will wind up in a minimum security type prison camp, but initially that probably won't be the case, given that he has a significant sentence of over 10 years. He'll probably start out in a more secure type prison.
Do you believe that there are, because we hear this all too often, sort of the country club prisons? None of them are that. They're prisons.
Oh no! You ask anybody in one of those jails, and they're not getting any rounds of golf in. They don't think those are country clubs, and they don't have the traditional bars that your penitentiaries have and your federal prisons have. But they are restrictive environments, and you have to work and contribute while you're there. So eventually, Congressman Jefferson will wind up at one of those prison camp level 1 type institutions. How quickly? That's really up to Bureau of Prisons.
Well, something else we're waiting for Begad to find out is that the jury had also ruled that Jefferson would have to pay back $470,000, which they felt is what he gained. And again, when you declare bankruptcy, how does that work?
Well, in every criminal case where there has been money, where someone has been defrauded of something, the court will, at sentencing, impose a restitution obligation. And there's no doubt that that happened in this case. Again, we'll wait to see. Almost no doubt that the court imposed a restitution obligation. And it's an obligation that's typically not dischargeable in bankruptcy. So even if his other debts are discharged, he's going to have to deal with that one.